We have two Kirras today.
Two Kirras. Kira and Kira.
It's outstanding.
I mean,
how many Kirras have you met in your lifetime?
I don't think I've heard of people who would say, I have a daughter named Kirra, but never actually meeting, I don't think, the person in person.
Oh,
just hearing about that. Yeah.
I'm your first Kirra.
Yeah.
You come on a podcast with another Kirra.
Yeah, it's true, actually.
I mean, what a crazy world.
And we both know this gentleman. So you know two Kirras. That's
Kira and Kira.
Nuts.
Crazy.
Anyways. We're back.
Welcome.
We're all healthy.
We're here.
Yes.
We're healthy. Back to a couple weeks off. Launch Radio is back, and we have a very, very special guest today. Her name is Kirra Sherman. She is an intuition coach and speaker. She is from Los Angeles and North Carolina, and she shares how to be certain of every decision you make by knowing what's real in your mind and the powers of intuition, your ultimate built-in certainty. She supported countless people over the past 5 years to realize the courage to live your infinite possibilities and ultimately know yourself and your own intuition. Her website, thedeeperspark.com, encourages people to find their deeper spark, and she emphasizes that perhaps day-to-day struggles people have may not be inside of them, but rather a product of not following your deeper spark and also understanding what's called the decisive person's secret. She has a coaching program and has been featured on Tiny Buddha, Living Holy, and Mind Valley, among many other locations. Her online program offers 3 to 6 month coaching packages designed to peel back the layers of limited beliefs and judgments so that one becomes more real and free to be themselves without question of worrying what's going to happen, but instead life becomes an effortless dance of following your intuition as it guides you ultimately to know what this life is really about. And Kirra, glad to have you here.
Which one?
Thanks.
Sorry, I had to do that.
That's going to make this
Sorry,
fun.
my bad.
It's going to be fun.
Anyways, it's a pleasure having you on.
Thank you guys. I appreciate being here. This is fun.
There's a lot to that. Maybe you can unpack everything that Geoff decided to read, because there's a lot there.
It's interesting hearing it read out loud.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, interesting.
Is that what I do?
You write these things. I know, right? Like, is that what I do? Do I do that? That's me. They're talking about me, Kirra.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't really know where to start, like what thread to kind of pull out of that. I mean, the basic thing that is intuition is something that I've been following personally for the past 8 to 10 years. And if you don't want to call it intuition, or just use some other words like your gut feeling, and most people can identify with that. Like, oh yeah, I just knew, or I just had a sense. Whatever they go, or usually I'll meet somebody at a dinner party and they'll say, oh, I think I know what you're talking about. And they'll usually tell me this elaborate story of something that happened to them. They're like, is that what you're talking about? And I go, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's just, how do you use that in your everyday? How do you trust it? How do you make a decision decisively using the clarity that you have built in with intuition, and really the patience to give decisions a lot of space, because that's what, the main thing of that course is about, is like most people either they don't feel that they're decisive, and that's because probably they're not totally connected to their intuition. But also some people are very decisive, but they're decisive in a control way. It's like, I need to make this decision, boom, I'm making the decision. They're not really sensing whether it's the right decision for them. Is it a true decision? They want to circumvent their emotional process around that and just be like, well, I don't really want to deal with that, so I'm making a decision. Boom. I'm breaking up with my boyfriend because he did this, Or It's like, well, hang on a second. What do you really feel? Like, what's really going on here? Like, and giving, that decision. So mainly, if I were to break down what I do, it's supporting people to know themselves through their intuition, to feel certain, to not need to make decisions just because they're feeling a moment of insecurity or discomfort. Which is where I find a lot of people will make very rash decisions, because it's like, no, I don't want to feel this, so
right,
Yeah,
stuff like that. But it goes a lot deeper than that.
It almost sounds like there's different ways people handle their own intuition is what it sounds like you're saying. Like some people avoid it, what's going on inside of them, or some people kind of fake it a little bit. There's different ways people
Or some people
approach
don't even
their
know
own.
what intuition feels like to know how to pursue it, right?
Well, as a Pilates instructor, sometimes, yoga, Pilates, running, whatever connects you to the body is really important for intuition, because a lot of times people are making decisions from their head. It's like, well, what's the logical thing for me to do? Rather than sensing from your intuition is usually in your body. And so for people who don't spend a lot of time in their body or don't have a familiarity with what it feels like, that's why they say that women are more intuitive than men. It's not true at all. But a lot of women are more connected with their emotions. They're connected with their body. And so, which is where you feel your emotions. And for a lot of people, especially women who don't do that or are very, logical and analytical, I mean, you still have a sense of your intuition, but your intuition is really in this space here. It really takes you to kind of, when people talk about like their center.
Yeah.
I'm feeling centered around this. Like usually that means they're connected to their body.
Their core.
That's where where you feel your intuition. That's where you get the sense of, I know maybe I should do this thing, but I really won't, sense to do this thing. And it's not logical. And so for a lot of people, they don't realize why they should do that. Let me tell you a story. Can I tell you guys a story?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. I think this is gonna clear this up. This is one of my favorite stories of all time. It's a little bit long, but I'm gonna try to keep it short.
No, I love it.
Okay. So I'm living in New York City, and I just started my business coaching for the first time on my own. I'd done a few different things in New York, whatever, and so obviously I was really throwing myself into this business. I had a lot of pressure. I had bills to take care of. I was on my own. It was just me. And I had started my business maybe 2-3 weeks before that. I was submitting, all these things to different podcasts, to blogs, doing all this stuff. I was really busy, really concentrated, really focused. And Friday came and it hit me. My intuition was like, put your technology away for the weekend. Now, technology is my computer, my speakers, all the things. Put it down in the basement. And my first thought was like, really? I was planning on working all weekend. Like, I'm under all this pressure, fuck you. Sorry, right. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this podcast.
Absolutely.
But, I don't really want to do that. Why would I do that? That doesn't make sense for me right now because I'm under all this pressure, whatever. But I know enough to sense, like, I'm going to follow this. Okay. But then the next thought was like, okay, but what if my parents try and get a hold of me? Like all the limitations, right? I referenced that in the bio thing. All the limitations come up and give me a laundry list of reasons why I shouldn't and why I can't do this. But again, I go back to the feeling. The feeling is clear. So I put it all down in the basement, and it was kind of a, and this is not about putting your technology away. This is not a tool or technique. Like, don't everybody go at home and be like, oh, I want to do this too. It's just my intuition told me to do it. It's not like, although sometimes it's really great to take a break from technology and all that good stuff. I'm not saying do or don't do that. But anyway, so I follow my intuition. I put it all down there. And there was all these unique experiences, like just having the space to not wake up with an alarm, which at the time I had been. I pretty much don't now. But, I woke up in due time and I was like, what am I going to do today? I don't have any friends to call. Like, I'm sort of on my own. And I said, well, I'm going to go for a run. Like that was the most, clear I could get. And then it occurred to me, I was like, wow, I can't watch movies today. Like there's nothing for me to do. I'm going to have to like really entertain myself. Or, I was like, what do I want to do? What do I love to do tonight? And I was like, I want to cook a roast because I love to cook. So I was like, I'm going to cook a roast. I'm going to take a bath. I started thinking of all these great ideas of like things that I would love to do since I'm not working. Anyway, I go to I grab just like a few, I don't know if it was a few bucks or like my keys. I didn't have anything with me, right? I didn't have the normal things. I didn't grab a Metro card, for example. Like I don't really have anything with me. I'm running. I've got like, a pocket this size. Anyway, so I'm going out the door and I'm going to go right to the butcher because I think, well, I'm going to buy a chicken to roast from my favorite butcher. It's like, I love going there. And so I was like, that's where I'll run to. But as I was stepping outside the door, it was like, go left. And I was like, well, that kind of throws a spanner in my works, but fine, I'll take a left. Like, and I had this imagination. It was like I envisioned this like long tree-lined street that I'd never run on before, but always really wanted to. Yeah. So anyway, I trust that. I follow the feeling to go left, and I find myself running down this beautiful street, and I've always wanted to run down it. The only time I ever see it is when I'm like driving in a taxi from a weird part of town. So I'm just having this great time, but it occurs to me, I keep getting these thoughts, which I'm going to call limitations at the moment, that are like, yeah, but you're running far away from the butcher. You're running far away from the butcher. You're running far away from the butcher. The thinking that happens. And usually that kind of thinking is what I call like uncontrolled thinking. It's just like,
right, that little voice in the head.
The voice in the head, right? Yeah, but you're going farther away from the butcher, And I'm like, shut up already. Like, clearly we're not going to the butcher. Like, give it a rest. I'm like, now I'm talking to myself in my own head. And I'm like, shh, just stop.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the thoughts stop. I stop thinking, and I just decide to go with it. And now I'm reaching what I call the flow. When you follow your intuition, you stop the thinking, there's like kind of an energy that you get, you feel like, ooh, I'm in the zone, like I'm in the flow, I'm not thinking about anything, like anything can happen. It's like you're really connected to those more possibilities than sometimes you are. And usually it happens when a lot of people get into like a runner's flow, or a lot of times it happens in sports,
like
when
Michael
you're in the zone. Yes.
Basketball,
that are impossible to shoot, but he just
creative realm.
Totally.
Yeah.
Creativity, all those things, like
the world
same
dissolves
energy
around you, kind of thing.
You're just in the moment,
yeah.
Right? But it's an active feeling, Sometimes you can be just present,
yeah.
But the flow is like usually there's an active energy to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm in the flow, and the next thing I envision is like the subway, and I'm like, I'm gonna go down the subway, and I'm like, wow, this is a new experience. I don't have my Metro card, so I guess or my subway card because I'm in New York, and I'm like, all right. I guess they do temporary passes, So there's like kind of these new experiences. And now at this point, I don't know where I'm going because I don't have a destination in mind. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to take this train, and I'll go into the city. Why not? Like I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So I get on the train. And you got to remember, I don't have a phone to go to. So I'm not like looking on Facebook as I'm riding the train. I just feel really connected to everything and everyone around me. Kids are laughing, people are connecting. There was like this guy with an accordion or something, like coming in and out of the train. And it was just like, I felt so alive, by just the simplicity of like throwing the plan out the door, having no agenda or even place that I plan on going to. And just this aliveness overtakes me, and I find myself on, going across the bridge, which is like my favorite, line to go across the river with, and I can see my favorite buildings in New York, and I just am relishing it, and I'm feeling this like flow, and this aliveness, and so then it hits me. I'm like, I'm gonna go to Whole Foods. And I'm excited. I mean, that may not be exciting to just everybody, but it was kind of a luxury at the time.
No, it's great. We just love Whole Foods.
I do. I love Whole Foods.
Yeah.
It's a happy place.
It is a happy place.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
They have massages there. They have
do?
like the whole. Oh yeah.
Who has massages at Whole Foods?
The little stands like you can get at the airport where they do your shoulders.
Yes. I don't know if it's...
Yeah.
What Whole Foods are you going to? Hollywood?
The one on Fairfax.
I'm missing out on
different
these
Whole
massages.
Foods do different things. I think the one in Venice has that too.
Yeah. They don't have them in St. Louis though.
No, I think it's more of an LA.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We all need massages. We're super stressed out here.
Yeah, there's no massage parlors in the St. Louis Whole Foods, but there is in LA everywhere. Anyway.
Enough about Whole Foods.
So I'm excited to go to Whole Foods, especially because I just started this business, and so I'm not really giving myself like the luxury of like going into town. I'm like really working hard and putting all my energy and effort into the business. So for me, I was like, all right, well, here I am in town, and the couple things about Whole Foods is that, first of all, there is this body wash that I can't get anywhere else other than Whole Foods, which I'd tell you what it is, but it's actually been discontinued since this story took place, which is a real bummer because I really miss this body wash. But anyway, neither here nor there. Maybe it'll float back into my world in another way. It's clearly not that important.
Well, you just threw it out there into the universe, so maybe you'll.
I've thrown this story out a couple times and it still hasn't come back to
really?
me. So yeah, no, I don't know. I just, it's duality, right? Sometimes you get a good result, sometimes you get a bad result. It's whatever. Anyway, so I'm feeling alive. I go down, and by this point, I actually realize I'm really hungry. Now, I can't find a chicken that is uncooked in Whole Foods, which, by the way, that's not really a thing. Like, if you go to Whole Foods, they're going to have a raw chicken, whole chicken that you can buy.
Yeah.
I look all over the store all by myself, and finally I solicit help. I say to the guy that works there, I'm like, hey, raw chicken, want to do a roast. Where can I find it? Oh, sorry, ma'am, we're all out.
What?
All out of raw chickens, okay? This is really important. If you're pay attention to this part.
All right.
Cue the serious music.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's great.
So there's no chicken. And I was a little reactionary about it. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, if I just gone to the butcher, so like now the voices in the head come back, right? The voices in the head are like, you just gone to the butcher, you'd have a whole chicken,
Yeah.
All right, okay, fine. Well, that's not what happened, so let's just accept this and move on. Pass through my disappointment. And I find the rotisserie chickens, and again, I happen to be hungry, so I was like, well, this is kind of perfect. I get to eat some of my chicken, and then I'll reheat the rest of it later, whatever, buy a few vegetables. And then I'm like, ooh, the body wash. Now, the body wash is, again, a clear feeling. It's like there's an inspiration. There's like a, my body wash. This is great that I'm here because now I can get it. I go to the aisle because I'm like right around the corner, and I have this thought. And it's like, well... And now I should preface this with, I told you I only left with the house with a certain amount of like cash and monies or whatever, like no credit card. And so I didn't have that much money, and so I was like, well, I don't really need the body wash because I'm pretty sure like it's at least half full at home, right? Mm-hmm. So I talked myself out of the body wash partly because my limitation of money, right? Which I had enough to do it, but I just thought to myself, well, what if something happens on the way home, or I don't know. It's like, well, I don't really need that right now, so I'm just going to pass on that.
But you're still in the flow state.
Totally.
Okay, this is all still flow.
Totally
okay.
Flow,
Okay.
but just like the negotiation of the flow, it's like I have a decision to make. Here we are. I get the sense that I wanted to buy the body wash. I felt it, but then it was like, well, I don't know how much money I have in my bank, and I don't have my phone, and I don't really need it because I'm pretty sure I have like at least I have a bottle at home, so this is not important. I'm just gonna move on. Anyway, so I've got my chicken, get a latte, standing over Union Square. And the other part of this is like, then I step outside, I realize the farmer's market's going on, so then I buy like some vegetables, and I love the farmer's market. It was like one epic small little thing after another that just made me feel like so alive, Yeah. Anyway, so I get done with all this, and I'm like, all right, it's time to go home. And I get back on the subway, and
You've got your cooked chicken, and you've got
my
your
cooked
latte,
chicken, some vegetables.
Massage. But held off on that.
Yeah, my imaginary massage.
And you have 2 pennies back to bring with you to Subway.
Right.
So you're on the subway then.
On the subway back, and I just feel this like appreciation. That's the thing about intuition and flow is like, usually it's like you don't have to be doing anything so great or epic or monumentous or reach some great life goal. Like flow state, and when you follow your intuition, is very much about the simplicity of just like, this is just awesome for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't succeed in anything that day. I didn't climb a mountain. I didn't, there was nothing that I could give meaning to as being particularly like great about myself. It just was like, this is just being alive, Anyway, so I get home, and 2 things happen. I think I like cleaned my apartment and like, organized or whatever, just kind of relaxed. And I turned the oven on, and I go to put the chicken in there, and then I think I like ran a bath, or I don't know, I was doing other stuff, and I come back like maybe half an hour later to check on the chicken, or maybe 20 minutes, I don't know, I can't remember. And I'm like, wow, that's not hot at all. And so like I kind of check around my oven, and I'm looking in the things, and it occurs to me, I'm like, oh, my oven is broken. I get the chills every time I tell this story. It almost makes me like a little verklempt. I'm like, wow, had I gone to the butcher and bought, according to my plan, what I thought was the best thing, I would have bought a raw chicken because they don't have rotisserie chickens at the butcher. And I would not have been able to cook the chicken that I had wanted to get had I not followed the feeling to take a left out of my door instead of following the logical right.
And for Whole Foods to not have any
Raw chicken
is even like more mind blowing.
Right?
Right.
So, you know, and who knows? Maybe the store guy was incompetent. Maybe there was, you know, but for whatever reason, I couldn't find it. He couldn't find it. You know, and again, like this is where it gets a little logical, where you could start thinking about it and you're like, well, but maybe the butcher also would have been out of the raw chicken. I mean, you know, it's hard saying not knowing for anybody who's super logical. Like you can go down that rabbit hole as much as you want, and hey, good luck to you. But like from my experience, you know, there have been so many things that are uncanny. I could tell you guys stories for days about shit that's like, what?
Yeah.
So do you feel you have a natural intuition and always have, or is it something that, because I know you can develop it, right?
It's
learning.
100% development, and I do feel like I have more energy sensitivity. Like a lot of people talk about being energy sensitive. I can feel and sense people's energy if I want to. Like most of the time I'm like I'm good. Like I'm gonna stay with my own energy.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to know what's going on in your world. Like I have enough going on in my own world, you know. But I can walk into a room and sense like, ooh, what's going on here? And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. Most people can. But when you follow your intuition, it definitely is like a muscle. It's like working out at the gym. You feel the niggle, and you usually are like, oh yeah, that's the niggle. You know, and then when you follow it and you find the flow, you have a direct experience of the flow, and then it's like that becomes more familiar to you.
What do you think the difference is between intuition and like sensory, like your senses? How does that tie together? Do you think that intuition is following sensory, or like how do you think that ties into that?
Well, they say that, you know, intuition is your sixth sense, and
which I remember we talked about. Yeah, which I'm curious.
So for me, yeah, it is kind of like that in a way, because you have your five human senses, and they call them human senses for a reason. Your five human senses relate to the physical world, right? So it's tangible. Intuition is totally intangible, right? It's a sense, it's a feeling. You can't see it. Right. You can't know that there is that by taking a left that it's going to connect you with a cooked chicken and lead you down that road. But the sixth sense is timeless. It's not connected to logic in any way. So it's almost like it kind of knows more than you do. It's energy.
Yeah.
So it connects with the energy of the butcher. It can connect with the energy of Whole Foods. I don't want to say that so much because I know that for some people are like, this is now getting woo-woo. Like, it's not an airy-fairy thing. Like, everything is energy. How else do you explain the fact that intuition took me to the cooked chicken, you know?
I think what people could gain from it, though, especially, is I think a lot of people probably have difficulty understanding what their logic is and what their intuition sensory is, and kind of what those feelings, what they are, because a lot of us living in 2019 can't, you know, have trouble differentiating the two. And it's like, how do you?
I have a really hard time with that. I'm much more logical than I am. Like, I never know if it's intuition that's talking to me or if it's I don't know. I live in like, we're here. I don't like turn that off, and then I'm like, wait, let me just feel things. I'm like, feel things.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Like, feel is kind of a. feel is it doesn't have to be like because the way that you're talking about it's like, ooh, icky feelings, like
yeah, like emotions.
Well, because thinking would be more logic, you would think, and feeling would be more like emotions.
Right.
Think of it less as feeling and more of like your sense. Like, for example, when you're having a conversation with somebody and you just can sense that like something's off about what they're saying. And it's like, are they telling the truth right now? It's almost like that. Like, you almost sense like, it sounds like a little bit of a fib or like an exaggeration. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sixth sense.
Like, so it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be the word feeling if you don't like the word feeling. Like, to me, it's like a sense. It's like, I call bullshit on whatever that person is saying.
Right.
You know what I
see.
mean? Like, that's your sense. You just have a sense that, like, or for example, my mentor uses this, and it's a good example. Like, this woman, she was saying to her friend, she was making this really big decision, and her friend was like, yeah, but how do you know? And it was like clearly like a big decision, like either a divorce or a new business or something like that, you know? She goes, I don't know. I just know. That's intuition. It's like you just have a sense of something that you're supposed to do, like whether it's starting a new business or, you know, it could be creativity. Like a lot of people relate to intuition from the creative side.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, you get this idea to do something and you're like, how come nobody's done this before? I can't believe nobody's even talking about this. Like, I'm going to do this. And then what happens, you know, usually after that is that's when the logical mind will come and say, well, but the last time you went on a limb, like you were rejected or you failed.
It talks you out of it.
It talks you out of it, right? So you're thinking
like the ego getting involved.
The limitations of your ego will come along and be like, yeah, but here's the cons.
Yeah.
But here's the pros, but here's the cons, but here's the pros. Now you're stuck in logic. Now you have no idea what you feel and sense and would love to do. Does that make sense? So it's connecting and staying with that sense and taking action on the sense the minute it comes.
And you believe that, follow that.
150 million%.
Okay.
It's taking you somewhere. You don't know where it's taking you. And that's why I use the chicken story, because it's so stupid. It's like, it's just about a chicken. Does it matter? Oh, and by the way, the last pump of my body wash came out.
Interesting.
Wow.
Do you see what I mean? Like I don't know what I necessarily know. And just for some of you who are like, yeah, intuition, like fluffy. You know, it's think of it like this. Your mind has so much sensory input coming in on a constant basis. If I were to shut my eyes and you were to ask me what's outside these windows, right? Like, to me, I'll keep my eyes closed. I feel like a weirdo talking with my eyes closed. Like, I would have to go back into my memory and think, okay, well, what is outside there? There's a house. Like, and if I were to really recall that information, I could probably get more information about what's outside than I would think that I could. You know, I could probably describe what I think are probably the kinds of trees that I had seen. Like one of them kind of is like that eucalyptus-y style thing. I think those are tiles on the roof, you know, but in the Spanish style, you know, I think there's a satellite there. I don't know. Not quite a satellite, more like a, what is that called?
Or like a
transformer thing?
Yeah, but you know.
Electrical transformer.
But there, eucalyptus trees, you know, but your brain has so much access to information. And what intuition does, if you want to call it's stored in your brain somewhere. Intuition is oftentimes the thing that will connect you to more information than you can recall on a conscious level.
Yeah. If
you want to go more scientific or like mind, for some of you who are very logical, you're like, yeah, airy fairy, like hocus pocus. No. Think about it like this. Like somewhere in my being, I knew that there was only a squirt left of that thing. But I don't consciously recall that because it's not in my conscious awareness.
Oh, right.
It's somewhere in here though. You know, so to give you now, I can't explain the chicken thing. That might be more on the woo-woo side, but it doesn't mean that I don't experience it all the time. And that's the thing about intuition. When you do follow it, you'll start to experience it for yourself, and you'll be like, "Holy shit!"
Well, it's kind of like the Mandela effect when we were talking about how we think we know, and we're like, okay, we're in control, and we're gonna plan our life, and like this is. you only know the reality that you see, and with the Mandela effect, there is the theory, a very strong theory, that we may not actually, that there's, everyone's right, no one's wrong. You know what I mean? And then you start going into like a massive rabbit hole when it comes to like what is reality and what's not.
Yes.
And are there actual such things as memories, or are those things that we're creating in our own head that actually happens? You know what I mean? Like we start to really question our own reality and our own thinking and our own movie.
We're all watching our own movie.
Well, to me, it's like, well, but and why does it matter? Like, why does that memory, like, why is that memory important? Mm-hmm. Whether it really happened or didn't really happen. I mean, for most people, at least who are interested in this genre of information, have come to this conclusion, I think. Maybe I'm so in this world that to me it's a foregone conclusion, but like, you can't prove anything outside of this moment.
Right.
I literally cannot prove there is anything beyond this wall.
That's right.
Now I can tell you according to my memory, I came from a downstairs and that my car is outside.
That's right.
And in the life story of duality in our life movie, that supports the story that it exists, but I could also walk outside and in the story my car was towed.
Right.
It was transported somewhere, potentially. How it got there, like, you can't prove anything ever actually has happened in the history of the world. Now, I know that's
history doesn't, well...
That's a dangerous thought experiment, because a lot of people are like, well, what about the Holocaust and things like that? Forget about that for a second.
Resistance,
sure.
When people say that. But yes, there is the theory that it doesn't really exist.
And that's a little far out. The way that I like to say it is, I'm like, well, you just can't prove it. It's not that it doesn't exist. My car is outside, but it's more fluid than you probably think it is, than we as a collective conscious think it is. Like, you can't actually prove that there's anything outside of this moment.
And
correct.
That's all I'm saying.
There may be a different parallel realm that we can't see, that's happening beyond that our own minds can actually process.
Even more simple than that, there is only right now.
And that's what I was about to say. This gets into the whole theory of the now,
right?
And
the present. You know, now we're into what is it? What are the religions that talk about that? Is it the Buddhism that emphasizes the now being present? Because that is so essential, and people are learning more and more all the time from what I read. Even the scientific too, like everything's happening right now rather than the future and the past.
And people living stuck in the past, you know, where it's like, was that actually the past? And then their past changes.
Well, that's why I was saying, it's like, why does the memory matter?
Right.
It's because you have meaning in it.
That's right.
And the meaning can be positive or negative.
Yeah.
The meaning of what happened to you when you were 5, you know, some family member left your family or whatever, and that becomes a meaningful, pivotal thing that shapes your world.
It's how you interpret it.
Okay? But does it really matter that happened? Right. Well, it matters to you, but why?
Right.
You know, same thing with a positive thing. Like, I graduated from college. I have a college degree. That's what I've labeled as a positive experience. But at the end of the day, that memory, it doesn't really matter whether that's there or not unless I'm bringing it into this moment and creating my identity through it.
Right.
Yeah.
Who cares whether that happened or not?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so that I can, like, my mom will be proud of me. Like, sure, my mom's going to be like, yes, my daughter is a college graduate. But that's her meaning.
It's an interesting thought because, you know, a lot of us come from all kinds of different families, right? That are, you know, great families and Leave It to Beaver, and then you've got like the shit show, you know, like my family, where you grow up and you're like, oh my God. And you get a little cynical. You're like, well, I had a terrible childhood or difficult childhood, so it stays with you and it becomes who you are.
Yes.
And it's actually a really good thought for people that that go through certain things where you hold on to that.
Yeah.
And you take it with you wherever you go.
That's right.
You know, but you allow it to define you or you don't. You're in control of whether it's defining you as a person. So
I would say that the definition probably is rooted in the emotional experience that you're still having with it in relationship to it. Because to me, Like there are things in my past that I don't hold on to simply because I've neutralized the emotions around it. And now it's like, well, it doesn't matter whether that's a memory or not a memory. It doesn't matter whether that it was an experience. It actually doesn't affect what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And so that's the process of what I take my clients through is like really the first part of like when I do a 6-month intensive, for example, it's like the first 3 months is like, look, you need to purge some of what you're holding on to and really take the time to feel the emotions that you feel. Because once you don't feel an emotional connection around somebody or something, that you've accepted that was what it was, and now you can move on to actually be here right now.
Right.
You know, you can't really live in the now if you're taking a bunch of baggage with you.
It gets heavy.
Sure.
I mean, carrying that baggage around is like a ton of bricks, you know?
Totally. And to tie that to following your intuition, living in the now is part of that, right?
Totally.
To channel the intuition, you kind of have to be in the now.
Well, think about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to my example to make this simple and relatable for everybody, if I have a huge emotional charge, like let's say when I was 15 years old, somebody died somebody died in my family. And because I didn't have my cell phone on, my entire family, told me I was a terrible person and how could I, be so irresponsible because Uncle James died and you didn't even know it because we couldn't get into contact with you. You're such a selfish person. Why would you do this to your entire family? Now, as a 15-year-old, right, you're going to be brutally affected by that.
Yeah.
You're going to think you're a bad person. You're probably going to have a negative emotional reaction to that.
Yeah.
Now, if my intuition tells me in a moment of inspiration, put your technology away, that's going to be a very different experience for somebody who's now an adult to say, but I can't because, and it's going to bring up a floodgate of memory and emotional, attachment to a particular story that you experienced that now holds you back from actually living free to do what you feel to do now. Take that and extrapolate that to every fucked up thing that's ever happened to you and how it possibly is impacting you from making a decision that you would love to do in this moment. And it doesn't have to be somebody else's rejection of you or disappointment or lack of love in you. It then becomes your own belief about yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm having an emotional reaction because you almost have like consistent PTSD from the emotional things that happened to you, where...
Start letting it define you.
Totally. So now, well, I can't do that. That's irresponsible. Now that's my own belief. But where did that even come from?
Right.
That's not irresponsible to simply put your tech. I mean, think about it from a factual basis, like putting your technology down in a basement for 2 days.
Yeah.
What is wrong with that?
Right.
No, what's wrong with it is the conditioning and the emotional experiences that you have around that, and let's just call it judgments. That's what they are. It's the meaning that you put in it. It's the meaning that you've experienced in the past. All those things are going to hold you back from doing what's in your heart right now, from accessing the flow, from following your intuition.
And on top of that, it's also that big picture, which different religions interpret this differently as well, about how things like your story about going to Whole Foods, how things happen in a way how they were supposed to happen, or things happen for a reason. And it reminded me, when you're saying your story, of a movie that I really liked. It got a lot of criticism, but I really liked it. And it was M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh.
He made a movie called Signs. And Signs was a farm in Pennsylvania that Mel Gibson played this farmer, and aliens came and attacked. And as it leads up to these aliens, you see certain things around the farm. Like, I don't remember it all specifically, but like the son... The older son kid had like a cold, and he was like blocking his nose, and then the daughter was always leaving water glasses around the house, and it was annoying, and they didn't know why. She was always drinking water, leaving around the house. When the aliens then invaded, they would knock the water over, and it like killed the alien. And the way he the aliens tried to poison him was through his nose, and the son was able to block it because he had been blocking his nose because of the cold. But it had that bigger picture of like the aliens couldn't attack because of things that had happened around the farm that they then realized in retrospect, which is really what kind of yours was. Like, whoa, this goes back to your oven and such. And so it's just like that. It reminded me of that movie he made, which a lot of people when the movie was made didn't even see that's what the movie was.
First of all,
I didn't even know that, and I've seen that movie like 800 times.
Oh yeah, that was.
Was that pre or post Mel Gibson's snafu in the world?
Pre.
Okay.
This was.
Joaquin Phoenix is in it, and he's hilarious.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to go see this now.
But I had no idea.
Oh yeah, people didn't get it, and I'm like, this is a great movie, and everybody else is like, what are you talking about? Just aliens invaded a farm. It was dumb.
I feel dumb.
There's a whole underlying message there.
That's cool.
And the same with The Happening that he made. I love. He's one of my favorite directors. But
right.
Don't like. But anyway, it reminded me of that. So everything, your story, which is wonderful, and everything you're saying, that ties into your coaching and getting people to. You try to help people have guide them, and also you have this decisive person secret. So it all ties into that, right? When you're coaching people, is the decisive person secret? Can you tell us the secret, or is that, what does that relate to exactly?
I mean, the reason why I put it as like a 6-week course is because like just like this conversation, right? I could say the answer is intuition.
Right.
But until I give you the context and the reference points of what that actually means, it's meaningless, right? It's not going to hit you in your own direct experiences and reference points of your own life to be like, oh, I get what she's talking about. Okay, limitations coming from the past based on an emotional reaction is what holds me back from acting on what I want to do now, right? Which is where the logic comes, because logic is always to protect you in sort of a way. It's like it weighs out the pros and cons of things, right? That's a relatable thing. But the reason why I make it 6 weeks is because there's all these different reference points of the ways that people make decisions, the things that come up around decision making. It's like, the simplest version is if you know who you are and you're very connected with your intuition and you don't think a lot about the decisions that you're making, that's the decisive person's secret, but that doesn't mean anything. Those are just words,
Right. Of course.
So that's the secret, but who lives like that, I do. And so what I do is I take people on this experience of, okay, this is what you gotta get through this in order to get through that, in order to be able to see your intuition, in order to be able to act on it. And it's not just about intuition, it's observing the patterns that you personally have with the way that you make decisions. Like, there's nothing wrong with the way that anybody makes decisions, but you might think there is. You're like, oh, I'm indecisive. One of the biggest things that I tell people, I'm like, nobody's indecisive. Everybody knows exactly what they want, period. It's really simple. Like, everybody really actually knows what they want to do, but what gets in the way? It's those things that, again, the past that you don't even realize, right? Because you just say to yourself, I'm not going to do that. You don't even know why you feel a resistance to doing that. There's not even an openness enough for some people to be like, well, why am I so resistant to this?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the interesting part. It's like you feel this resistance and you're like, no, I'm not doing that, but you don't even know why. Like, resistance, by the way, is a huge indicator of where you have some sort of emotional fucked upness around something. Right, because otherwise there would be no resistance. You would just be like, oh, that's an option and that's an option. But for a lot of people, it's like, no, I would never do that. Whoa, take it easy. Yeah. Why not? Like, what's wrong with that? Well, it's obvious what's wrong with that. You just don't do that. Well, okay, but why not? Why don't you do that? And I'm not talking about like murder or whatever, but just like, I just don't wear pink lipstick.
Day to day, yeah.
Right. Like, I used to, as an example, I used to be very adamant, like, I am not getting married. There's absolutely no. And I was like 7 years old when people were like, no, you'll, and I never wanted to do that ever. That just was not something I ever wanted to do. And then I realized it was because of what I watched in your like, there's no experience. Way I'm gonna get in this shit show.
Yeah.
And you didn't know, and people were like, no, you'll get older, and like, fuck that. No way am I getting married and dealing with that kind of craziness. You know, you don't know where certain things come from.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's really interesting. I wonder, though, your clients that you deal with, I have to imagine there's so much that everyone kind of blocks that, like, where do you even begin to help release all that?
Well, that's why I usually do like a 6-month intensive for somebody who's more has been on a self-awareness journey for a little while. Like, we might be at a different starting point.
Okay.
To where there is sort of a maybe there's a familiarity with their emotions already. Maybe they have, you know, a sense, and then it just becomes about, okay, well, if you don't have that many blockages, like, then who are you? It becomes more of a journey of connecting to the bigger picture of who you are and really acting on your intuition on a more regular basis, becoming more familiar. But yeah, the first, you know, 3 months of when I do an intensive with somebody is usually looking at what are those blockages, you know?
Okay.
And it comes up in the everyday, to answer your question specifically. What did you do today? How are you feeling?
Right.
You know, and usually something happened at work.
Right.
You know, well, this is what happened. Okay, so how do you feel about that? You know, and then it becomes a process of it's never the first answer. It's like, well, I feel angry about that. Yeah, okay, well, tell me about that. You know, you unpack it about 7 layers deep, you get to this core emotion. You know, and then
interesting.
You can move through it.
So do you do that in your own life when, like, something happens? Do you unpack it in your own of, like, okay, I had a bad, you know, someone hit my car, let's say, or someone's hit you on your way home. Pray to God that doesn't happen. But let's say you get in a car accident and you get rear-ended, right? I know, knock on wood. Sorry, it was a terrible example. I just realized.
That's all right. It's Los Angeles, you know?
Yeah, I know it happens.
It's funny, though, because I haven't gotten in an accident in, like, 20 years. So, like,
Oh, God, I'm so sorry.
I know. I've been thinking about it a lot lately because it's like one of those things, like, you, like, literally take your life into your own hands in Los Angeles, you know?
So
you're like,
true.
and I'm such an aggressive driver that, like, good for better or worse, like, that's a good thing sometimes in LA because you're constantly on the defense and you will, like, get in an accident otherwise. But anyway,
that's what the Kirras do. We're aggressive drivers.
You Kirras.
Do I unpack?
Yeah. So, like, okay, you get in an accident, someone rear ends you.
If I have an emotional reaction, but here's the thing: the more that you live like this, actually, you don't have as much of a reaction to things, or it's a lot smaller. You know what I mean? It's like it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and not like in the, you know, something terrible just happened. Well, it is what it is.
Right.
You know. I mean, like, even something positive happens. I always put my attention on, well, it is what it is.
It's a different lens, kind of, in a way. You're seeing things through a new...
For example, my mom asked me, you know, I've had a relationship that's been, you know, a little tumultuous, and she goes, well, that's good, right? Like, you know, he said that's good. And I'm like, maybe.
Right.
Maybe it is. And not because I'm not emotionally connected to my story, but because... It's like, well, I don't really know if it's not really good or bad to me. It's just like, it is.
It is, right.
It is.
You know, it is.
Right.
Isness. It becomes, it is. But don't get me wrong. Yeah, if I have an emotional reaction to something, or like, for example, I'll give you a personal example that'll be relatable. Like, I noticed that I was seeking validation from somebody outside of myself the other day. And I was like, I'm feeling a little discomfort with this person, and I can see that it's because I'm looking for validation. So my unpacking of that is simply the awareness of, okay, how do I bring my energy back into, well, where in my life do I feel valid? You know, connecting with the feeling of feeling valid within myself that has nothing to do with anybody else, and looking at the areas of my life that I, you know, get recognition, or not necessarily like recognition, but just like that I feel valid in, that I feel comfortable in, that I feel a sense of validity, or I don't know, that's such it's a weird word to use, I think, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll unpack that through the awareness of observing that's happening.
See, that's interesting. I've always said the way we relate to other people, for example, if there is a cashier that's kind of bitchy and you're like kind of getting, you know, you're checking out, you're buying milk and cheese or whatever, and she's just like, and you kind of take it personally.
Yeah.
And then you leave, and then you think she was pissed at you, and it's like, it has nothing to do with you.
It's their own thing.
It's your own, you're attaching your own personal feelings toward, that person's dad may have just died that morning.
Sure.
You have no idea what people are going through. Yet it's this personal, you absorb it, and then on top of that, you take those feelings of like, wow, she was kind of a bitch, and then subconsciously, you're now going to go and be kind of rude to someone else. Unless you're aware of what is going on in the pattern, the domino effect of that.
Well, let me throw something else in there, because a lot of times people will be your reflection, if you will, in the sense that like somebody's being bitchy and you can easily see the bitchiness in somebody else, but you can't see the way that you're bitchy with other people.
That happens.
That's interesting.
So much.
Yeah.
that happens all the time.
So it's one of those two things. You either take things personally and you know you're creating a story that's happening that isn't really happening because you're feeling insecure, or you're not connected to the security that you're not feeling centered.
Yeah.
Because when you're feeling centered, you're like, this has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Even if it has to do with me, it has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like my red lips might remind this guy of his ex-wife, you know, and he's like, fuck this fucking, you know, woman.
Guess that,
you know, like,
Geoff decided to bring on.
Right. That is still not my story.
Right.
That's his,
it has nothing to do with
that's his emotional experience.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I find it more commonly, or equally as common, is when it's actually something that you don't like that in somebody else, but you can't see that you have it.
That's so interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's what I do with my clients, is like, they'll tell me a story and I'm like, let's dissect this. Let's get into is it this? Is it this? Like, how are you, you know, and we come to a point of it, and then there's the aha moment of like, fuck, I am that.
Yeah.
That must be so exciting when you get your clients to that point where you're like, and ta-da! You know, like the aha moment, and they all feel like, oh, you're almost like throwing up from like, you know what I mean? You're just like, ugh. And now you're like, oh, I feel better now. Like I got sick, and now I feel better.
Yeah, but you got to remember, it's a painful process because you have to be willing.
It's like
to throw up.
It's literally like a
Who wants
cleanse. Like a removing of the...
Because nobody wants to be a piece of shit, you know? Like, nobody wants to be an asshole. You're like, but that guy's an asshole. I'm like, well, how are you an asshole, you know?
You're
and then it's like,
oh my God, I am an asshole. Yeah.
And my first thing to everybody on the planet is just like, look, everybody's ego is an asshole. Like, it's not personal to any one of us. Like, it's protection. It's trying to keep you safe. It's trying to make you feel valid in yourself. Like, your ego has agendas for a reason. It's trying to give you love. And the thing is that we associate love for some people as control. If they grew up in a controlling household and then they control other people, they feel love.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like there's no judgment on anybody being an asshole. If anything, like I'm a piece of shit. Everybody's a piece of shit, you know? Like, because
I love
there
that.
is a part of us that is that takes that form, and it will do anything that it can to make sure that we're getting love.
Right.
And when you realize that, it's like, oh, all right.
It's not a personal attack. That's just being a human being.
Now, are there things that people, we have to wind down in the next 5 minutes because we're pushing an hour, but this is...
We're pushing an hour?
Are there anything that people can do at home, because obviously not everybody can meet with you, though we know they would love to. Is there something they can do at home to get in touch with this intuition side? Are there things like meditation and yoga? How much do those help? How much do those play into increasing their awareness?
You know, as I said in the beginning, like being in your body, however gets you there. Like some people don't like yoga, so don't do yoga. You know, some people, I really like to run. I know if I'm like processing something, you said, you know, unpacking, sometimes I don't even know what it is, and I just have to go run. And I'll run and I'll run and I'll run. And then I'll just notice, like, there's a little release that might happen. You know, I might have a few tears or something, or whatever gets you in your body. You know, that could be meditation. But again, not thinking meditation, like literally focusing. I think I have a meditation that you can buy on my website actually that's really short, and it's like it's like to get in your body. It's like an emotional, it's like a scan. And if not, like reach out to me and I'll create one for you. Like it's simple. Sometimes it's just 5 minutes of like not moving. And not thinking and not rushing off to go chase your dreams or find your next husband. Like just stopping to just sit and do nothing.
In the moment.
Yeah.
Just do nothing. Don't think about anything. And I know that's hard because you're like, well, I can't stop thinking. If I could stop thinking, like that would be the end of all my problems, you know? And I hear you. I understand. I can relate. Part of where the thinking comes from is unpacked emotions, if you want to know the truth.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking about the things that give you the shits, right? Like,
yeah.
Those are your emotions. Those are your judgments. You're thinking about the things that you worry about. You're thinking about the things that concern you. Those are all your judgments. Those are all your limitations, if I could be blunt, you know? So, yeah, it's being in your body. Yeah, doing anything that you can't stop. Just sit on your sofa for, like, 10 minutes without watching TV. And just notice what your thinking is. What are you even thinking about? Because that's where all your stuff is, usually.
Are you a believer in that app like Headspace? Have you heard of that?
Whatever. And you can use anything.
Music.
Exercise. Do anything. Like that's how I do it. You know, I just sit and I watch my thoughts.
Yeah. Headspace talks about like cars on the highway or clouds going by. Just those are your thoughts. Just like watching a highway, cars go by.
Visualizing each.
But the content of your thoughts gives you a lot of clues as to where you're at.
Yeah.
You know, it'll show you because what do most people think about? Sex, money.
Right. Yeah. Dating, whatever.
When am I going to meet the person that I really want to meet? How come I haven't met the person that I'm going to meet? Paying bills.
Family,
you know. Yeah. My sister. You know, my so and so's dying. Like whatever the thing that's bothering you. That's where your stuff is. That's what you want to unpack.
Well, thank you.
It's so amazing. I feel like we need a part 2 with Kirra.
And
not because her name's Kirra, but because we need a part 2 because it's so fascinating.
It's just because my name is Kirra. I mean, don't lie.
And I would go over.
Kirra times 2.
I mean,
part 2 and 3 and 4.
We could do multiple Kirra episodes. YouTube keeps me at an hour, which is why I have to end it. But Kirra Sherman. Her website is thedeeperspark.com.
Yes.
She does intuition coaching, all sorts of amazing intuition, everything you just heard. This is Geoff and Kirra.
And I'm Kirra.
And Kirra.
Launch Radio. Thank you, everyone.
Good luck.
Talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.